Okay, so moving, it's super exciting, right? A fresh start, new adventures, but there's always that little voice in the back of your head, isn't there? What happens if your favorite piece of furniture or something really sentimental doesn't actually make it to the new place in one piece? Well, that's exactly the question we're going to dig into today. We're unpacking everything you need to know about removalist insurance right here in Australia.
So here it is, the big question every mover asks. When something goes wrong, who's on the hook? I mean, you're literally handing over all your worldly possessions to these people. So what happens if, your brand new TV gets dropped? Or worse, your grandma's priceless antique vase gets a big old crack in it? Is a simple, oops, sorry, really gonna cut it? Probably not. Just picture it for a second. Moving day is finally here. The truck pulls up, you're buzzing with excitement. And then you start unpacking. You open that one special box, and bam, your favorite painting has a tear in it. Or there's a huge, deep scratch across your dining room table. It's just a gut-wrenching feeling, right? And that feeling is exactly why we've got to talk about insurance.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What's the deal with insurance when you're moving? Let's talk about the solution here, because when it comes to protecting your stuff on the move, you're looking at a very specific kind of coverage.
This is where something called removalist insurance, you might also hear it called transit insurance, comes into play. Think of it as a protective bubble for your belongings. It's designed specifically to cover your stuff for the entire journey, from the second it's packed to when it's on the truck, all the way until it's unpacked safe and sound in your new place.
Now here's a massive trap a lot of people fall into. They think, oh, it's fine, my home and contents insurance will cover it. But here's the thing. That policy is for when your stuff is sitting at one fixed address. The moment it's on a truck, it's a whole different ballgame. Most home policies have big, bold exclusions for goods in transit, especially when handled by movers. Plus, the coverage limits probably won't be high enough for your really valuable things anyway.
Okay, so we've established you need this specific transit insurance. But, and this is a big but, not all policies are the same. Not even close. So let's break down the different options you're probably going to see when you start getting quotes.
Right, so most movers will tell you they have insurance, but it's often not the insurance you think it is. They'll have things like public liability, which is great if they accidentally punch a hole in your wall, but it does nothing for your stuff. Then there is carrier's liability. But here's the catch. It usually only pays out if you can prove they were negligent. So if some other driver causes an accident on the highway, guess what? Your belongings probably aren't covered by their policy.
If you want that real sleep-at-night peace of mind, you need to look at the optional comprehensive insurance. This is where you'll see terms like full cover, which is basically what it sounds like. It protects against pretty much all accidental loss or damage. Or you might see restricted cover, which is for specific events, like a fire or a major crash. And hey, here's a pro tip. If the insurance your mover offers seems a bit dodgy or just doesn't feel right, you can absolutely go and get your own standalone policy from a third-party insurer.
All right, let's talk about the rules of the road, so to speak. What does the law actually say about all this? What are your rights as a consumer? Let's get into the legal side of things. Okay, now listen up, because this might be the single most important thing you hear today. In Australia, there is no law that forces a removalist to insure your goods. Let me say that again. It is not legally required. Sure, they have to provide a certain level of care under consumer law, but that is not the same as having insurance. The bottom line, the responsibility to make sure your stuff is properly covered, well, that lands squarely on your shoulders.
So how do you actually protect yourself then? You've got to be proactive. You need to ask for the paperwork. There are 3 key things you want to see. First, the PDS. That's the product disclosure statement. It's the document that spells out exactly what is and isn't covered. Second, ask for their FSG, the Financial Services Guide. This proves they are legally allowed to even talk to you about insurance. And third, get their AFSL number. That's their Australian Financial Services License. If they can't provide these, that's a huge red flag.
Okay, so this all sounds great, but it's not free, right? Of course not. So let's talk about the cost. How much is this peace of mind actually going to set you back, and is the price really worth it? Generally, you're looking at a premium that's somewhere between 1 and 5% of the total value you declare for your goods. So, let's say you reckon all your stuff is worth about $60,000. You'd be looking at a premium of anywhere from $600 up to $3,000. Now, that's a big range, I know. The final price really depends on how much coverage you want and the specifics of your move, like how far you're going.
And that brings us to the million-dollar question, or, the few $100 question. Is it worth it? When you're already forking out a ton of money for the move itself, does it make sense to add another expense on top of that?
Well, honestly, the answer is different for everyone. You need to think about a few things. First, what's the total value of your stuff? And I don't just mean the price tag, I mean sentimental value too. Second, how far are you going? A big interstate move is just naturally riskier than moving a few suburbs over. But really, what it all boils down to is your personal comfort level. Ask yourself this: if the worst-case scenario happened, could you afford to replace everything?
So let's bring it all home. We've talked about what this insurance is, the different kinds you can get, the laws or lack thereof, and what it's likely to cost. It really all comes down to one final thought.
Look, at the end of the day, moving is already one of the most stressful things we do in life. Adding a huge financial risk on top of that just seems crazy. Insurance is simply a tool to manage that risk. So as you're planning your big move, you know all the risks now and you have an idea of the costs. The only real question left to ask yourself is, what is my peace of mind worth?